I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, Governor Bob Ferguson is still acting like a budget hawk, but can he be trusted? That's not a rhetorical question. I am really still deciding. Plus, a disturbing scene in Olympia that seems like something straight out of communist China, and our continued efforts to protect girls' sports in Washington state was just dealt a big blow. We'll discuss that and much more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month. And if you are a member of the military, a veteran, or a first responder, you can get 30% off your first year of Undivided. Use the promo code USA at patreon.com/undivided. Hello, and welcome to Undivided on this Wednesday. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. A ton to discuss on the show today. I don't even know that we'll get to it all, but we will see. Of course, budgeting is the big issue. Look, I don't trust Bob Ferguson still, obviously. I mean, you don't get to erase 12 years of wrong, really more than 12 years of wrong, by all of a sudden being a fiscal conservative and saying no to a couple things that Democrats want. However, right after our show concluded yesterday, and we talked a lot on the show about our concern about the budgets that were passed by both Senate Democrats and House Democrats, because they include the largest package of tax increases in our state history. Among those tax increases is a new tax called a wealth tax. And essentially, if you have more than $50 million, the wealth tax would target you out and tax you on unrealized gains, which I don't even see how that would be legal or how it would be something that our state government would be able to actually carry out. Bob Ferguson seems to feel the same way. He had a press conference and said he will not sign either of those budgets that were passed in the House and the Senate because he does not support the wealth tax.
Neither budget, however, is close to one that I can sign for two key reasons. First, they each propose far too much in taxes. Second, they both rely on a wealth tax, which is novel, untested, difficult to implement, and, most importantly, for purposes of adopting a sustainable budget, will face an immediate challenge in court. If the legislature wishes to complete our work on time, they need to immediately move the budget discussions in a significantly different direction on both of these issues.
Love that. Love that. Yay for you. So I understand what he's saying there, and it is a smart fiscal thing. When you're looking at a wealth tax, in order to balance this budget, which they've included a ton of new spending. We're in a $14 billion budget hole, and they're like, let's spend even more. And then we'll come up with all these new taxes, and then we can keep spending at excessive rates, and then we have revenue that's going to keep up with it. But when you have something like the wealth tax that, as he said, it's untested, it's going to immediately face a challenge. And if you assign money to all of these things that you want to fund, and then the wealth tax is struck down, well, you're in a pretty big predicament, aren't you? You're right back to where you started. And Bob Ferguson, it seems like, is saying that he doesn't want to go there. He wants them to be more responsible, to rely on revenues that might not be immediately struck down. So I love that. I think it's good. He's sending them back to the table. This relies too much on taxes. Here's my problem and my caveat, though. The wealth tax is bad, but it's not even close to being the worst of all the taxes that are still on the table. Not the least of which is a massive property tax increase for millions of Washingtonians that will have no limit, that will be tied to inflation, that will be tied to population growth, and will push working class people out of their homes, not to mention retirees. So the wealth tax, to me, is the low-hanging fruit. It's kind of the most salacious because taxing unrealized gains is an insane concept. But for Bob Ferguson, it's the safest of all the taxes for him to come out and say, I don't support that. We're not balancing the budget with that. It might not even be feasible or legal. So it makes no sense to build a budget off of it. So I'm very worried that he refused to, on multiple instances during this press conference. I mean, of course, the reporters in the room asked him about the other taxes. Okay, you say the budget is built too much on taxes, but you're singling out the wealth tax as being particularly problematic. What about the B&O tax increases? What about expanding Seattle's failed payroll tax across the entire state? What about the property tax increases? And every time he was asked, he simply said, basically, I'm not answering that question.
On some specific questions you may have, obviously we're still going through that.
Are you entertaining the idea of a 5% payroll tax?
What I'm going to do is have a conversation with both caucuses.
Both budgets are dependent on revenue from the payroll tax. You're pretty clear on one, but so why are you not taking a more clear position?
Because I'm starting with the wealth tax.
Whether you support it,
Yeah.
maybe not the amount, but do you support the tax and you
Appreciate the follow-up. My answer is still the same, but thanks for the question.
Where does your support stand
I'm just
for
not answering
increasing
that.
the cap on property taxes?
I appreciate all the questions on different revenue sources.
Appreciate it.
I'm just not going to engage in those, so I appreciate that.
Not
Do
going
you
to
have any
engage it.
concerns about how that would impact the cost of housing and already expensive state for it?
I have concerns about any revenue source and what that means for businesses, for Washingtonians, you name it.
Have you shifted your stance at all on potential furloughs for state workers?
No. We put those ideas out there for the legislature, as you know, and we've got a very challenging budget situation.
Governor,
Yep.
you stood here a few weeks ago and said, we're not going to tax our way out of this thing. But it sounds like what you're saying today is you're going to have to, in some respect, tax your way out of this thing.
Disagree. I mean, we're not going to, by the tax away, what I mean is, hey, a bulk of what we're doing is on taxes. That's the two proposals we have. That's my definition of taxing our way out of it, is what those two proposals are.
Do you have a top line number in your head? Because
Yeah.
I mean, the Senate's got 17 billion, the House has got 15 billion. Do you have a number you?
I have one in my head, but I'm not ready to share, which I hope you understand. Yeah, so
What are
we're
we
having a
doing
lot of
here?
conversation. I just want to really emphasize that. Look, it's, and you all know this, there's a lot of conversations going on. There's a lot of negotiations. There's a lot of critical issues. And bring all that in for a landing in a few weeks is not going to be easy. But do I think it's achievable? Yes, I do.
Yeah. So here's the problem where he says, I'm just not going to, and he keeps, and look, I understand some of this is you're trying to negotiate things right after this meeting. He had a meeting with Senate Republican leadership and Republican leadership from the House. So he's trying to talk to all sides. I get it that part of negotiation is keeping a little bit close to the vest, but you're coming out there and you're saying we can't do it with all these taxes, and you're only committing to not supporting one of the taxes when really it is not. It's bad, but it's not the most significant proposal in terms of its impact on Washingtonians and our business climate. So that has me very concerned. Because similarly, and I think Chris Daniels with Como 4, who you heard a question from him there, that he alluded to maybe a month or so ago, might have been a little bit more than that. Bob Ferguson had a press conference where he came out and he said, hey, here's what I think the budget should look like. We've made $6 billion in cuts or whatever it was at the time. But I, on this show, knocked him at the time he had this press conference. He's talking about all these cuts they came up with. But even then, he refused to answer any questions related to, okay, $14 billion budget deficit, you're coming up with approximately $6-7 billion in cuts. Simple math says that you still have billions of dollars to account for, so you support new taxes or no, and he wouldn't commit to it.
After going through this exercise anyway, are you now leaning more in the direction that you might have to sign off on some tax increases, and what would they look like?
I'd say it's too soon to say right now, Jim.
Our tax, regardless of what type of tax is, just the basic math indicate that some sort of taxes are inevitable.
Look, I'm new to being governor, but I'm not new to the legislature, right? Last time I checked, we've still got 2 months to go in this legislative session. I need to sit down and have a conversation with legislative leaders. What are they finding out? I know they're doing their own work, which is not insignificant. They're leaning into it as well. So look, at some point, I'll have a better answer to that question, but I just don't think that's right now.
So what did I say at the time when he did that? I said, man, he's setting up his legislative Democrats to take the heat for this. So he comes out at the time, look at me, yay is me. I come up with all these tax cuts or all these spending cuts. Won't answer any questions about taxes, saying, oh, we'll see what the legislative Democrats come up with. So I said he's going to throw them under the bus because he knows the math doesn't math. So if all he could come up with is $7 billion in cuts and we're still short $7 billion, he knows that you have to have revenue to make up that deficit. He just wants legislative Democrats to be the ones to have to propose it. So I said that at the time, and even after his press conference yesterday, I still believe the same thing. because he's not ruling out these other taxes. He knows taxes are going to have to be part of the equation if they don't come up with all these spending cuts. And so he just wants to look, in my opinion, which is what this show is about, he wants to, at every turn, distance himself as much as humanly possible from the actual decision to implement taxes, especially taxes like what will be a deeply unpopular and harmful property tax increase. And if it were another politician, maybe I wouldn't feel that way. But because of Bob Ferguson and how he operates and his, clear focus on what is going to make him look the best, his political ambitions sort of look the best and most promising, that's how I feel. And I said it. This was a tweet I sent out January 17th, okay? And I made a prediction. And I still feel like this prediction is very valid. I said Ferguson is strategically softening people up for the eventual, I did everything in my power to avoid new taxes, but sorry, we have no choice conversation. I hope I'm wrong, but feel free to bookmark this. Bookmark it, we have. Because he knows that that's going to happen. The easiest low-hanging fruit is the wealth tax, probably not even legal, won't even pencil, so he wants them to go restructure the budget without the wealth tax. But if he's not coming out at this juncture, it's April 2nd. There's less than a month left in the legislative session for them to do this work. So if he's not coming out at that press conference at this moment and saying, and also, property tax, absolutely not to that extent. Expanding Seattle's failed payroll tax across the entire state, look what it did in Seattle. We're not doing that. That's not a good decision. Not to mention that the revenue from it will dwindle over time, just as it has done in Seattle. And so that isn't a good fiscal future for us either. So 100%, I'm glad he said no to the wealth tax and that he's sending them back to the table. I am also glad there's a little friction finally between Democrats in the legislature and the governor's office, because there just hasn't been that friction previously. But I still think he's just setting them up to be the ones to have to be the bearers of bad news. So, is the verdict still out? I guess. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he comes out and says no to the property tax increase in particular, as devastating as the other ones would be. I just don't see us emerging from this legislative session with a full Democratic majority with no new taxes. Don't see that happening at this point. The question is, which ones are going to survive? I will say, I don't have this for you, Nicole, but it came into my inbox, so I just want to address it quickly. This morning, 60 business leaders in our state from some of the state's largest businesses. I'm just really quickly reading over the, I see Nordstrom's on here. I see SSA Marine. I see Washington Trust Bank, WaFed, Zillow. So some of our state's largest employers, they have just sent a letter to the four corners of the legislature. So those are the Democratic leaders in the House and the Senate, talking about the budget. Saying yesterday we were encouraged by the governor's announcement that he would not sign the proposed wealth tax. We support the 5 priorities he outlined as fiscally responsible in these unprecedented times, such as preserving the state's rainy day fund. And we agree with the governor that we cannot just tax our way out of here. And then they go on to talk about the disastrous business taxes that are still on the table, hoping that state lawmakers will take a different path and also rule those out as a source of additional revenue. So the business community speaking loud and clear, as well as the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce, Washington Roundtable, the Association of Washington Businesses, in this letter, again, just sent to the four corners of legislature and the media just a few moments ago. So they are hoping that they can avoid the business tax. But again, so there's always loud voices, right? And I love rich people. Rich people are great. Totally jealous. I love it. If I could have 50 mil, 100%. What a cool position to be in, to be angry about a wealth tax because you got $50 million. I don't think wealth tax should exist. I also don't support singling out big businesses for taxation simply because they pay their employees too much money. It's weird. But, they have loud voices. They have a platform. They have money to take on this fight. They have lobbyists to send to Olympia. Who doesn't? Who doesn't have billions of dollars? Who doesn't have lobbyists to send to Olympia to fight on their behalf? You. So when it comes to the people who are down there right now in the ears of the legislature and the legislative leaders and the governor's office saying, hey, don't tax us, don't tax business, you don't have that same representation in the ear of the governor and the legislative leaders and Democrats saying, hey, don't raise my property taxes so high I can't afford to live here anymore. So that has increased my concern, and I feel it in my gut right now, this like nervous sensation. It has increased my concern that at the end of the day, the ones left holding the bag for Democrats' inability to budget is you. And you're going to be facing astronomical increases in your property tax. And I will give credit to, so this email was forwarded on by leaders on the Republican side of things. And their communications director, Kimberly Wirtz, I actually really appreciated her email because she sent on this letter, just if you guys would like to see this letter we just received from the business community. But she also said, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to read this on the air, but I don't think that she would mind. She said, I would like to encourage you, this is to all members of the media, to give more attention to the proposals to increase the annual growth rate for property taxes for the same reason that I'm discussing. And I'm very happy that Senate Republican leadership and the caucus sees that, hey, the ones who aren't getting the loudest voice at the table are citizens, everyday citizens, who are possibly going to be taxed out of their home. So, I appreciate them making that note, and we do need to make sure that we do that and give you guys the voice that you need, which leads me into my next story. So the voice for you in Olympia is the media. So you don't, like I said, you don't have lobbyists sent there on your behalf. You don't have millions of dollars to put out TV ads like the ones I'm seeing discouraging some of these taxes on businesses. You have your voice, and a lot of you used it. In fact, 43,000 of you registered in opposition to the property tax increase, and that does mean something. A few of you got a chance to actually testify before the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and I thought some of that testimony was incredibly powerful and meaningful. We played a clip yesterday from an older couple that said, man, we've been living in our home for 45 years. We've raised our family here. If you increase our property taxes, we will have to sell this place we've called home for such a long, long time. Those things are really meaningful, but they perhaps, as much as I think they should, they don't have the weight that a lobbyist or millions of dollars from the business community that's also, making maybe handshake deals behind the scenes to donate to people's political campaigns has. So your lobbyists, quote unquote, in Olympia are the members of the media. I think for a lot of people who watch this show, they don't think those lobbyists are doing a very good job on their behalf. I think that's probably why you watch shows like this and why you consume other independent new media sources. I hear from people all the time that they have just, that legacy media is not something that they trust to hold politicians accountable and to really ask questions with their interests in mind. And that's a conversation we need to have as we talk about press access in Olympia, which is our next story. And I'm really frustrated about this today, but I want to try to explain it in sort of a way that makes everybody understand what's at stake. We have millions of people in this state who aren't being well served by the legacy media. The legacy media has an intense bias in favor of Democrats, which is the party in power. So that doesn't do people very much good. When you have the media that, for all intents and purposes, seems to be in the pocket of the Democratic Party and really parroting a lot of their talking points. So don't you think that Washingtonians who dissent from the prevailing political view deserve to have members of the media who are in their corner too, who are asking the hard questions, who are trying to hold powerful people accountable for their failures that eventually fall on the backs of working class people? That is the reason why we and others have been fighting, increasingly so, to expand media access in Olympia to new media. Because a big chunk of this state, they're fine with the legacy media because they believe what the legacy media says, because the legacy media shares their bias. But for everyone else, who's there fighting for them? And new media, of course, happens to lean more conservative. People like me who maybe felt out of place in traditional news and left those jobs to be able to pursue the kind of storytelling that we're doing now because we think it's important and we don't think that we were able to do it in traditional television, which was the instance for me. So as you know, we've been engaged in this sort of tit for tat with the powers that be in Olympia over just trying to get the same press access that the legacy media outlets have. It's time. Legacy media is dwindling anyway, so as fewer and fewer reporters are in Olympia and new media is flourishing, why not say, okay, we need more people in Olympia holding the powerful accountable, so let's make sure the new media outlets that are doing this work, even if they're opinion outlets, are able to go in front of lawmakers, ask them questions on behalf of the people. That's what gets missed in this. Like, we're an extension of the people. And if you take us out of the equation, you're robbing millions of people of their quote unquote lobbyist in Olympia who is lobbying on their behalf. So as you know, and this is a whole ordeal that we talked about on the show last week, the Capitol Correspondents Association Olympia was so opposed to issuing myself and Jonathan Choe an independent journalist press passes that they abdicated their responsibility over press passes for the first time in more than 50 years because they were concerned we were going to sue them. And they handed that responsibility off to politicians. So now, as of last week, politicians in Olympia are in charge of press access. We're still waiting to see what that means on the House side, but in the Senate side, Democrats introduced a new rule that basically said, okay, if you say you're a member of the media, you can get a press pass. However, you can't come into the wings unless we specifically invite you, which is a total conflict. You mean I have to go to a lawmaker and say, hey, will you invite me into the wings to cover a press conference that's in the wings or to interview lawmakers? It's insane, right? So we railed about that. Well, our friend Jonathan Choe went down to Olympia yesterday to test things out. God bless Jonathan Choe. And I was on the phone with him. This stuff's wild. This is some communist China stuff, you guys. Buckle up. So I was on the phone with Jonathan Choe the night before, sort of, talking about what his plans were. And we, under these new Senate rules, we get press passes. You just have to register for them in advance, which we've done for the rest of the legislative session. And you get a little pass for the week that says you have a press pass from the Senate. So Jonathan Choe did the same thing. So he was going to be down there armed with a press pass, ready to cover the legislature. Now, he had some good experiences and some very, very bad experiences. Color me shocked that one of his good experiences in doing this was actually with Governor Bob Ferguson. So we played those clips from Governor Bob Ferguson's press conference. Well, Bob Ferguson had no problem in the world having Jonathan Choe at his press conference, which I give him a lot of credit for. Jonathan said he got no pushback whatsoever. He sat in the room with the rest of the media, and Bob Ferguson even took a question from him. Here it is.
Governor Ferguson, as you know, homelessness in America is at an all-time high. Washington's ranked number 3.
Yeah.
Clearly, the current plan is not working, yet the Trump administration has indicated that they're going to cut some more funding at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that could impact homelessness even further here. Some of the largest housing providers, DESE, coming out expressing concern. First of all, what's wrong with cutting wasteful spending into programs that are clearly not working and maybe even enabling homelessness on the streets? And also, what is your backup plan in the event the Trump administration does indeed cut even more at HUD?
Well, a couple thoughts on that. So, I think on the point about, hey, what's the plan if there are more cuts? I tried to outline that approach in my remarks, right? Whether it's for homelessness or whether it's for public health or whether it's for education, cuts like that, I believe, are coming. I believe that. And that we certainly have to prepare for it. The way to prepare for that is maintaining those rainy day reserves, for example, right? Is to budget in a way that's sustainable, to put ourselves in as strong a fiscal position as possible for whatever those cuts are, and to minimize big investments now, because who knows what choice we're going to face in the future, right? We need to have the ability to help out Washingtonians if they're the victims of a natural disaster, right? That needs to be something we're able to do. So that is why I'm outlining a budget in the way that I am, is so we're prepared for whatever those cuts might be. And hey, whether it's, to be clear, I think you referred to sort of wasteful spending, whatever term one wants to use, but part of our $4 billion in reductions included things I think most Washingtonians would say, yeah, we should cut, whether we've got a budget challenge or not. I think there's over $4 million for a warehouse that we were still renting based on COVID times for storage, right? The team identified that. We don't need that anymore. That makes sense no matter what. So I think in whatever area of the budget it is, we will need to make sure that every dollar we're expending is working, right? That it's achieving a goal. And when this budget process is over, which is a little hard to think about right now, but it will be over at some point, and after we give KD and her team a good long break, which they deserve, I'll be preparing a supplemental budget and having a chance to go through in more detail than honestly I've had this time, right?
Is it time to step away from housing first, which is the primary policy?
Oh, this is not the time for a lengthy policy discussion on that. There's a lot of stakeholders and folks who have a lot of opinions on that, but But as a state, we need to make sure we're continuing our investments to make sure we're helping out folks who are unhoused.
And that was it. Anything scary or problematic there? Any glaring reason you can see why Jonathan Choe wouldn't be allowed at that press conference or other press conferences in Olympia? He asked a very smart, important question of the governor in a very reasonable way, keeping with decorum. Bob Ferguson answered it, gave a pretty lengthy answer. I mean, maybe didn't answer it to the extent Jonathan would have liked. And then guess what? They moved on. Other people asked questions. And Jonathan Choe left the governor's office, no problem at all. So exhibit A that it can be done. And it's really not a big deal to allow new media to be sitting in the same room, God forbid, as the hoity-toities in legacy media. Now, I want you to, however, compare that press conference that Jonathan Choe was allowed to attend to Jonathan Choe attempting to attend a Senate Democrat leadership media availability in the wings of the Senate. Watch.
Why can't Jonathan?
He's not credentialed.
He is credentialed. He got his credential for the week.
It's right here, sir.
Not the wings.
But the press briefings are in the wings.
Yeah, I know, and you can't come into the wings.
I can't come in?
No.
So can I get an escort?
You can go to the gallery, you can go to the press table.
Can you escort me in?
To the press table?
No, I mean to this press conference so I can be in there with Carlene and ask questions.
You're credentialed. Like, you on a list? I mean, if you want to die on this hill, God bless, but like...
What are you guys afraid of? What are you guys afraid of? I'm just asking questions.
I mean, Carlene can come in if you want. I mean, if you want to...
No, I'm happy. I'm happy to. I was...
Credential. What are you guys afraid of? You afraid of questions? I don't get it. Yeah, why?
Jonathan, you're not a reporter.
I'm not a reporter. Says who? Is there any person of color in there right now? Did an action? Aren't you guys all about DEI?
John, good luck with your fear-mongering. Good luck.
Yeah, I guess lawsuit too then, huh? All right, so it looks like we're going to have to do a lawsuit. They're not letting us in.
All right, Carlene, I'm letting you in.
All right.
I'm going to go in.
Yeah.
And you're going to hang out?
I guess. This dude ain't letting me in. I have multiple credits. How many news directors do you want me to call you guys to tell you I'm reporting for them?
Listen, this is, thank you.
Yeah. You guys are afraid of questions. You guys don't want to be held accountable.
That's insane. So the woman who was there is Carlene Johnson. She's a reporter for the Center Square. And I give her a lot of credit for trying to stand up for Jonathan Choe, saying, wait a second, because Carlene had actually been in the Center Square, had been one of the outlets that the Capitol Correspondents Association had refused to credential until our attorney got involved, sent a demand letter, and then they gave up the credentials for the Center Square, but wouldn't give up the credentials for Jonathan Choe and I. But Carlene, having been robbed of a credential herself at one point, stood there for Jonathan Choe and said, what do you mean he can't come in? He literally has. Listen to this one clip again, back.
He is credentialed. He got his credential for the week.
It's right here, sir.
Not the wings.
But the press briefings are in the wings.
Yeah, I know, and you can't come into the wings.
So he has a credential issued to him from the Senate, but that credential doesn't get him into the wings. And the press conferences are in the wings. So you have Senate Democratic leadership that's about to hold a press conference on this whole budget ordeal. And despite having a press pass from the Senate, they refuse to let Jonathan Choe inside. Wrap your mind around that one. What good is the press credential if he can't use it to access a press conference? And compare that again to the perfectly normal, perfectly polite and fine exchange Jonathan Choe had with the governor. So the governor's okay with it. But Senate Democrats, you're not a journalist, Jonathan Choe. You can't come in. Now, I know the man in that video. I sent him a lengthy email this morning. His name is Aaron Wasser. He's been working in the legislature with Democrats as a communication person for a long time. I have had nothing but pleasant exchanges with Aaron Wasser, even though I often have very pointed criticisms of his members. So, of course, I sent, and I have lots more on this, it gets even crazier. It gets full-blown North Korea, okay? I have sent an email this morning to Aaron Wasser asking him simply, should I expect the same treatment? I have plans to go down to Olympia perhaps Friday and next week because I don't want to cause a scene. Should I expect to be greeted at the door after years of covering the legislature in Olympia, because I'm not with mainstream TV anymore and because I give my opinion, will I be greeted at the door with the same animus? Will I be told you're not a reporter, you can't come in, despite the fact that hundreds of thousands of Washingtonians rely on us for coverage of the legislature? And despite the fact that we produce more content about state politics than any other news outlet, new media or old media, in the entire state except for TVW public access, not even close, will I be greeted in the same way? I did get a brief response from Aaron Wasser, and it was basically, hey, you know, this situation isn't perfect. I'll respond with a more detailed response later. So I don't know yet. But it doesn't matter to me. If I'm given access, let's say I go down and I'm greeted with open arms differently than Jonathan Choe in the wings of the Senate on the Democratic side, that doesn't mean shit if Jonathan's not. Because their willingness to erode anyone else's press access, I don't care if it's the sloggiest blogger at The Stranger. I don't care if it's a borderline communist rag. If their job is to cover politics and they're not being given access to do so by the very politicians they're supposed to cover on behalf of their readers, then I am going to have a problem with it. Because the erosion of any press freedom and First Amendment rights is an erosion of my press freedoms and First Amendment rights. And it's something the legacy media simply doesn't understand. So this gets crazier. So I'm kind of waiting. We're doing our show yesterday, and this is before I knew that that had happened to Jonathan Choe. And it's before I knew that Jonathan Choe had been allowed into a press conference with the governor's office. I get a text message from a legislative staffer who basically says, hey, FYI, the Washington State Patrol is following Jonathan Choe around the Capitol right now. And they sent me a picture. They sent me a picture that shows 3 Washington State troopers, and what they said was a member of DES, which is the Department of Enterprise Services, who seemed to sort of be on a walkie-talkie. And I said, well, you know, maybe this is nothing, because there's always state troopers at the Capitol. They're there all the time. DES is at the Capitol all the time. I don't see Jonathan Choe in the photo, so they're looking at something, but I don't know what it is. So I thought maybe this is just a misunderstanding, right? Surely in the United States of America, armed, uniformed law enforcement is not shadowing a journalist around the state Capitol building, right? 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 Surely. Well, if you'd think that, you'd be wrong. So I reached out to the Washington State Patrol and just said, hey, here's what I'm being told. And I really expected them to come back and say, no. That's not what they said. They came back, and I appreciate the transparency. Chris Loftus with the Washington State Patrol came back and provided me a blow-by-blow breakdown of what happened yesterday from the perspective of the troopers who had been dispatched for the situation. And they indeed confirm. This is confirmed by the State Patrol. I'm not going to read all of this. And they call Jonathan the subject, which is so crazy because they're talking about a journalist, right? I mean, it's cop speak, but when you think of it in that way, it's just wild. So essentially what they say, the blow-by-blow, the subject was observed on Senate floors 2 and 3 attempting to interview members. Well, he is a journalist. Is that something worthy of a police response? Because that seems pretty normal. Okay, let's move on. Subject gained access to the Senate floor. Well, that's fine. He has a press pass that gives him access to the Senate floor. So what's the problem? It says, but then he was escorted out by Senate security. Members, being Democratic lawmakers, complained to Senate security regarding possible violation of Senate decorum rules, i.e., camera in face seeking interview. That's literally his job. Have you guys ever seen network news and the scrums of reporters that chase down members of Congress in the hallways and put cameras in their faces and shout questions at them? That's kind of part of the job. So members of Congress are okay with it, but Democratic state lawmakers, that's just too much for them? Again, this is from the State Patrol. Senate security engaged 2 troopers in the gallery and asked WSP to maintain a presence while the matter was discussed with the subject. Troopers went down and waited while Senate security spoke to the subject. Troopers called security operations. The Security Operations Center contacted DES's public space compliance specialist. The subject, Jonathan Choe, left the Senate area and went in and out of the building, but eventually to the governor's office. That's where trooper involvement concluded. The public space compliance specialist observed the subject in public areas of the legislative building for about 10 minutes and did not observe any issues of concern. Neither the Washington State Patrol or DES directly engaged the subject. The situation was handled per policy and duty. Appropriate actions included non-escalating observation after complaints from elected officials. Let's be clear, complaints from Democrats. Nothing in there to me describes a situation worthy of 3 uniformed and armed Washington State Patrol troopers being tasked with monitoring the movements of an independent journalist in the United States of America. Completely unacceptable. I don't care who it is. Again, I don't care if it's a basement blogger from Seattle with left-wing ideologies that I find abhorrent. They have every right and duty to be in Olympia, and even if it means they're over on the Republican side of the wings, sticking cameras in the faces of Republican lawmakers and asking them questions, that's the job that those lawmakers asked for when they ran for office. If they didn't want to be held accountable by anyone, state lawmakers probably not the job they should have sought. Think about this. It is utterly insane. I've got to, let me play this one back from the exchange Jonathan Choe had with Aaron Wasser.
What are you guys afraid of? What are you guys afraid of? I'm just asking questions.
Jonathan, you're not a reporter.
I'm not a reporter. Says who?
Does that sound familiar to you? It sounded familiar to us. Roll the tape.
You're not actually a journalist. You were fired for promoting the Proud Boys. So we talked with reporters like those in the room.
Jonathan, you are not allowed in there.
I'm going to go as I don't understand why I'm not being allowed to go in.
You're not a member of the media, Jonathan.
So I'm not being allowed to go in?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. Telling an independent journalist, you're not a journalist. In one instance, physically blocking Jonathan Choe from attending, this is several years ago now, from attending a tour of a public homelessness complex, a media tour of a public homelessness complex that Jonathan Choe was the only reporter in the entire city of Seattle who had covered it and the problems with it. And the community had been talking to him and doing interviews with him about their concerns about the homelessness complex. Sounds like a journalist to me. And then he goes to tour it with the rest of the media. He's physically blocked by staffers from King County Executive, now Sound Transit CEO, Dow Constantine. If you don't see those clips of public officials paid for with your money, Dow Constantine is now getting a $450,000 a year salary. Every one of those videos telling Jonathan Choe they're not a journalist. You paid their salary. If that doesn't give you a pit in your stomach and make you think of China and Russia and North Korea, I don't know what to say. It's really scary stuff. And the fact that my friends in the legacy media continue to stay silent about it is really beyond my comprehension. Would you feel the same way? Do you feel the same way about Donald Trump? How many years? And this is one of the reasons I got into the TDS thing and Donald Trump and his fake news, everything's fake news. I had a big problem with it. I understand some of it now. But when they took away Jim Acosta's press pass with CNN, I had a big problem with that. And so people see it through a political lens, but it's not political. Whether it's Jim Acosta, who clearly has a very far left bias, or whether it's someone like me, frankly, who very clearly has a conservative bias. The free press is the free press, and we all have a role to play in the ecosystem. Am I a straightforward journalist? No. But like I said, we produce more state political content than any news outlet in the state, and there are hundreds of thousands of people who consume that content and rely on it to be informed about what's happening in Olympia. And I'd go back to something I said earlier, who rely on us to be a voice for them in a room full of reporters who have failed to be a voice for them for 20 years. So who gets to be their advocate? Who gets to be their voice for the Washingtonians who are concerned about crime, who are concerned about overtaxation? Do they have representatives from the press who are concerned about their interests in those rooms? And somebody pinged me on Megyn Kelly's podcast. She did something with the New York Times, and I haven't watched it yet, but the sentiment about it I sort of absorbed, which is we really should just be moving towards a place where all the reporters just share their bias. Because it's a more honest way of operating, right? You know, legacy media might look down on me because I give my opinion or whatever it is. Well, you're biased and you don't admit it. I'm biased and I'm honest about it. Which one's worse? Which one's worse? And all they're doing by blocking someone like Jonathan Choe or blocking someone like me from having full access, the same the legacy media does, is they're protecting their narrative. And they're shutting out the voices of millions of Washingtonians who do not agree with what they're doing. And it is absolutely by design. One more clip I want to replay for you. So I mentioned Carlene Johnson with the Center Square who's there. I noticed something. It's very brief in the video, and so I froze the screen on it so you could see. And I just give her a lot of credit for in that moment trying to stand up for Jonathan Choe when so many others simply will not. And look, Jonathan's not everyone's cup of tea. Sometimes Jonathan's not even my cup of tea. He's aggressive the way he goes about things. But just because you might not like him or the way he goes about things doesn't make it any more important or relevant. And we've already seen how far these elected leaders will go to evade questions. So someone sometimes putting a camera in their face, yeah, it's necessary. And he's one of the only ones who are willing to do it. But Aaron Wasser, the communications person, says something to Carlene Johnson. So Carlene has a hard pass. So she's allowed to come into the wings and to go to this press conference. And she just doesn't want to go in quite yet because she's trying to advocate for Jonathan Choe to come in too. And Aaron Wasser says something to her, and the look on her face says it all.
Credential, like, you want to list. I mean, if you want to die on this hill, God bless, but like...
What are you guys afraid of?
That's the look of, I will die on this hill. And I will die on this hill too. Because as we allow the erosion of press freedom, today it might be the Democrats, tomorrow it might be the Republicans. And whether it's the Democrats in Olympia doing it or Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. doing it, I will never be okay with it. There was a reason our founding fathers saw fit to protect our ability to cover those in power, our ability to speak freely. There's a reason the First Amendment is the First Amendment. And if we would allow people of our own political party or our own political ideology to erode it, then we are giving a seal of approval for the other political party to erode it as well. And I will never, ever think that's okay. All right, so put a pin in that. It's not the last you'll be hearing of it. I've encouraged you guys to take the First Mark Challenge, firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. Why? Why not? Because it's free to do, and you could end up saving hundreds or thousands of dollars a year on the insurance that you already have. We hear so many stories. Eric, an undivided viewer and listener, says he finally gave in, took the First Mark Challenge. They're now saving him 30% on his auto policy and 70% on his homeowner's policy. I heard from one undivided viewer who saved $4,000 a year, and the consistent theme from everyone is, why did I not do this sooner? It was so easy, just scheduled a little time to talk to First Mark. And look, sometimes First Mark will come back and say, hey, you actually have pretty good insurance, or, we can't find you what you need. And they'll turn away your business. And to me, that's the sign of an honest company. That's the sign of an honest broker who's just going to be looking out for your best interest, your budget and all of those things. So don't waste any time. Take the First Mark Challenge today. Just takes a little bit of time. Go over your current insurance with them. Talk about the options. They'll go out. They'll do the hard work for you. Firstmarkinsurance.com. Firstmarkinsurance.com. The very best part is they work for you, not the insurance companies. All right. I'm a little heartbroken today, although I can't say I didn't see this coming. So we have been discussing since, I think right before Christmas, what the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association was going to do when it comes to protecting girls' sports. There had been a movement within the WIAA and its membership to say, look, this is ridiculous. We can't let boys play against girls. Now, I don't know if that's the prevailing viewpoint of the members of the WIAA in the schools. I mean, we live in a very progressive state. There very well could be more schools that want to continue to allow boys to play against girls, unfortunately. But the big thing is they were going to take a vote on it. There were 2 amendments introduced. I won't go over them in detail, but one of them, Amendment 7, was saying that participation in the girls' sports and girls' division of sports would be restricted to students who were assigned female at birth. So basically saying if you're a boy, you can't play against girls. And then there was Amendment 8, which was a kind of an alternative, saying athletic programs will be offered separately for boys and girls, and then a third open division for all students interested in participating. So either way, I mean, I had one that was a preference. I don't think the open division would have been feasible for a lot of sports because they wouldn't have enough people to participate. But either of them would be better than the situation we're in right now, where literal boys play against girls, which makes no sense. Nothing you can say to convince me otherwise. So this had sort of been lingering. And then, as we reported on the show last week, Superintendent of Public Instruction Kruse Reykdal sent a threatening letter to the WIAA that basically said, hey, don't do this because it's against state law and there'll be consequences for it. And he'd been sending out threatening letters to all these schools that had spoken up on behalf of girls' sports or refused to implement some of the radical gender ideology or refused to hide things from parents. And so Kruse Reykdal was just on an absolute binge sending out threatening letters because he's the king of the castle. So I didn't know the extent to which those threatening letters would be successful in getting the WIAA to back down. I had hoped there's enough pressure from parents and enough pressure from the federal government and from Donald Trump saying, hey, we're going to withhold federal funds if you guys continue to allow boys to play against girls. But the reality is at this point, Donald Trump hasn't paid attention to us. I don't know how. I mean, Riley Gaines has been talking about some of the stories out of our state, but Donald Trump is obsessed with Oregon and Maine, and we're over here like, hey, things are bad here too, but he just hasn't given us the attention. So I guess the WIAA decided that it was going to kneel to Kruse Reykdal. So there was an article that came out in the Seattle Times. The headline, WIAA says vote to ban transgender athletes would violate state law. It says 2 proposed rule changes for transgender student athletes in Washington will be advisory-only votes after the WIAA, the governing body for high school sports in the state, determined changing the rules would contradict state law. So they're going to take a vote on this, but the vote won't mean anything. So you could have a situation where all these schools come in and they vote, we want to protect girls' sports, it's the right thing to do. All this time debating these amendments, the vote won't mean anything. It'll be advisory only. How ridiculous is that? The WIAA offered a statement, which was shared by the Seattle Times. It says the WIAA has been told by the AG's office, the Office for Civil Rights, and OSPI that proposed amendments 7 and 8 would be a violation under current Washington state law. Affirming our own attorney's legal review, the WIAA remains committed to following state law, and those amendments focused on gender identity participation would not be implemented on August 1st if they were to pass under current state law. What about federal law? What about the federal government? So really the only option at this point, and I'm just devastated for all the families that have spoken out and all the girls who have spoken out, all the coaches that have started to speak out, all this work to craft these amendments to try to rally support for them, only to have Kruse Reykdal come in and say, kiss my ring, you're not doing this. Kruse Reykdal has to go. At this point, he's lost his mind. The Attorney General, Nick Brown, has also lost his mind. He's spending his time in office picking ideological battles rather than doing the business of the people of the state of Washington. I mean, really, the AG's office is now dedicated, full-time to pursuing 80-20 issues on the 20% side. Like, hey, let's fight to help kids continue to mutilate their bodies. Let's fight to continue to help boys dominate girls in sports. Let's fight to continue to keep dangerous criminals who are in the country illegally here, safe and sound. It's wild stuff. Really, 80-20 issues, if not more. And that's what our Attorney General, who ran as a quote-unquote moderate, has dedicated his time to in his first few months in office. Nutso. So the only saving grace right now will be President Donald Trump will be somehow getting his attention on these issues and having them take a serious look at what's happening in Washington state and, if necessary, withhold federal funds. So a major blow to our fight to protect girls' sports. Super devastating. All right, I was going to do this on the show today, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to, I posted a story last night. One of my favorite stories I've ever written. It is a wild ride, man. The headline, when being a social media troll comes back to bite you hard. If you simply can't help poke the hornet's nest, at least make sure your own hive is in order first. This is a twist and turn story that you absolutely must read. There's no paywall. It's up on paywall. It's up on Patreon and Locals right now. And it has absolutely everything. It's got politics. It's got, man, a fugitive from justice. It's got conservative infighting. It's got social media trolls. It's got lawsuits. It's got charges of sodomy. It's got everything you might want in a story. And it's really about this guy who runs if you're active in Washington political social media, it's an account called Outrage Pacific Northwest. And his shtick, his name is Eric Kroll. He has a criminal record out of Oregon, and his shtick is always attacking conservatives who he doesn't think are conservative enough. So I've been a favorite target of his, which made writing this story all the more sweeter. But it's this fascinating tale of how Eric Kroll, in his obsession with retribution against his perceived political enemies, actually ended up getting his own son arrested on a felony warrant out of Oregon for sodomy of a child under 12 years old. It's a whole crazy story. So I highly recommend you reading it up on Patreon and Locals right now. You can access those sites by going to undividedpod.com. Just absolutely fascinating. All right. We're going to get to our Planned Parenthood story. We did a subscriber poll on it yesterday, and I had asked you guys, what, if any, involvement do you think Planned Parenthood should have in our schools? Most of you said no involvement whatsoever. We'll be on high alert, parents, because they're going to try to get involved anyway. We'll have that coming up next. First, if you're thinking about selling your home, May is going to be a really good time of the year. But really, at any point this year, reach out to our friend Wes Jones at sellwithwes.com. The real estate agent or the real estate market is looking good right now for sellers. The issue is, that there's just not enough homes on the market. So the buyer demand has really been pent up. So if there's a good home that hits the market, it's priced right, it's properly prepared for sale, those are the homes that are being scooped up really quickly. And that's what you want as a home seller. So Wes can help you with all of that. He's going to start by giving you a free market analysis so you know how your home should be priced when it hit the market. And then his team is going to go to work. They are masters of marketing, and they have something called the Listing Boost Concierge Service, which will make sure that not only does your home shine on the online listing, but in person as well. So by all means, reach out to a few real estate agents, see what they have to offer, see what they bring to the table. And then after you've had a chance to vet a few of them, reach out to our friend Wes Jones. I promise you, you'll love what he and his team can do to get your home sold. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right. If your child comes to you and says, "Hey, Mom or Dad, I joined something called the Teen Council at school," you tell them, well, I can't say that on here. You tell them that they're not allowed to go back to that school. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Okay, so we got an email from someone who's been collecting information on something called the Teen Council for years. And it sounds harmless, right? Like, your kid's like, "Hey, Mom, I'm on the Teen Council." I would think it was something like
political, like
student government.
Student government,
like,
right.
"Oh, good for you, Sally.
Learn how
and then
it works."
Your child's going to come home a month later with pink hair calling themselves Steve. You're going to be like, what happened? Or they're going to come home knocked up with 10 STDs and they're going to be like,
it's normal.
It's totally normal. So the Teen Council is just a name for a Planned Parenthood pushed teen group where they try to recruit teens in schools to be sexperts. Not kidding. Okay. So here's a couple. So these are all over Washington, but this is the South King County Teen Council's Instagram account, right, Nicole?
Yeah.
And it says, so this is on their Insta account right now, peer-led sex education, dedicated youth activists. Are you or is someone you know interested in providing sex ed to schools in your community? You must be entering 10th through 12th grade. You can earn $400 during the school year. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So they're paying 10th or 12th graders to be teen sexperts to mentor other students on sex. And you might think, well, hey, know, well, I guess that's not so bad. Better than coming from an adult if you teach them, they're talking about safe sex or abstinence even, or the dangers of STDs, et cetera, et cetera. So first, Teen Council is run by Planned Parenthood. It's described as Planned Parenthood's peer-led sexual health education program. We create peer-to-peer dialogue through classroom presentations, informal conversations, and outreach projects. Here's the kicker. We provide medically accurate, trauma-informed, inclusive, comprehensive sex education to the community. So not just your school community, your community at large. Whenever I hear Planned Parenthood say medically accurate, when they try to convince us that boys can be girls and girls can be boys, not a lot of confidence in that. Also inclusive tells me they're pushing an awful lot of radical gender ideology. And as I said, this isn't just in other school districts. This is all over the state of Washington. Spokane, Pierce Teen Council, Vashon Island Teen Council. Some of these images tell me everything I need to know. Dick cookies? So they're passing out penis-shaped cookies. Great. Oh, and vulva-shaped cookies. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. There's someone with bright pink hair and stuffed animals shaped as a uterus. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see this little post from Vashon Teen Council. Orgasms can lower a woman's risk of heart disease, stroke, breast cancer, and depression. Fun sex ed fact of the month. Now, look, I don't know about the link between orgasms and breast cancer or stroke, but I can see how orgasms might reduce your risk of depression. Not sure it's something that kids need to be learning about via the Teen Council, per se. Let's see. I want to go back to this Seattle King County Teen Council and some of the posts that they've made on social media. Yes, they have pictures down in Olympia. So not only are they teen sexperts being recruited by Planned Parenthood, but they're also going to advocate in Olympia. So not only are they paying your children to be extreme gender ideology sex advocates, to train kids that orgasms will reduce their chances of depression at a time when teens are suffering more depression than ever before. So they might just think that orgasms are the trick, but they're also training the next generation of Democrats to be advocates. They're holding, they had a rally in solidarity. Like a solidarity with what? Doesn't matter, right? Because they're just training them to be the future Democratic activists of America. They had one where you get a $30 gift card.
For attending a virtual workshop. Who wouldn't do that?
Virtual sex ed workshop. And then, of course, they talk about contraceptives and all the ways that you can prevent pregnancy. I do have to note that, again, for something that's going to be marketed to teenagers, one of the options is sterilization, a medical procedure that permanently prevents ovulation or insemination. So, they are teaching your children, whether you know it or not, and this is not the first time we heard this. There was also an Olympia sex ed lesson taught to 6th graders where they prioritized anal sex and permanent sterilization ahead of abstinence as a way to avoid pregnancy. Some days I'm glad I don't have kids, frankly. Some days I am glad I don't have kids. So this particular parent said now is the time of the year that Teen Council is recruiting students to join their sex club. So this parent emailed us and said, hey, you need to tell people what the Teen Council really is, because it sounds like just a fun peer group. And if that's what parents are being told, parents are being lied to. So make sure you talk to your kids about this. This is also happening around the country. We pulled a couple quotes. And look, this is just about teaching kids to embrace radical gender ideology and insane. Let's see here. They feature, what do you want me to read? What?
Eli and Sean.
Oh, yeah. Here's Eli, 12th grader. Here's a quote from him. Really? Sexually transmitted infections are normal. 1 in 2 people get an STI before they turn 25. So first of all, why are we teaching kids that sexually transmitted diseases are normal? Like, I understand that a lot of Americans do get an STD before the age of 25, but the goal is to make them want to avoid them, right? Make them want to take safe sex measures. Not to say, hey, it's normal, don't worry about it. That is...
Just keep having sex with multiple people.
Yeah, it's not... The other one says the same thing. Like, are these even real people?
Right.
Sean H., 11th grader. STIs are normal.
So they both have the same quote.
One fact I wish everyone knew about sexual health is STIs are normal, as he poses in this bevy of what kind of flowers.
I like how they call it STIs and not STDs, because STDs, those are bad. STIs are totally fine and normal.
I mean, absolutely insane, you guys. So teen council, stay away from it. And just another indicator that Planned Parenthood maybe at one time had a role in schools back when they were kind of a normal advocacy organization that really did seek to give genuine good medical information about safe sex and avoiding pregnancy.
For planning.
For knowing the birds and the bees. That's clearly not what Planned Parenthood is anymore, not even close to it. So I don't see how any role from Planned Parenthood in our schools is even remotely appropriate. It's just
terrifying.
Wild. All right, so we might not have the attention of the Trump administration on our radical gender ideology, girls' sports, etc., but we do have the attention of Congress on Washington's sanctuary policies. We'll get to that national news coming up next. First, would you like to run your retirement portfolio through a Department of Retirement Efficiency? Wouldn't we all? I mean, it's a huge thing, planning for your retirement. Maybe you've had the same money manager for years and years and years. What harm is there in getting a second opinion? What harm is there in getting a second opinion and having someone look at it through the lens of risk management? That is what Zach Abraham and his team at Bulwark Capital specialize in, is managing risk. And one of the questions they always ask people who are thinking of, coming to them for their free risk review is, are you confident in the composition of your portfolio for the current time, for 2025? And if your answer is, well, I don't know, which honestly is probably what my answer would have been, well, that's a good indication that you should ask Zach Abraham at Bulwark Capital to do a full risk review. They'll do a reveal of how they're looking for opportunities to lower risk, how they go about that, lower cost, give your retirement as much upside as possible. And the Know Your Risk portfolio review is completely free. And again, there's no obligation. So if the idea is, let me just get a second opinion to see if I'm on the right track here, Zach is awesome. Zach and his team would be more than happy to help you out with that. You only get one retirement, get a second opinion on your portfolio's efficiency. Schedule your free risk review now at knowyourriskradio.com. Don't put it off. knowyourriskradio.com. Okay, I just wanted to fit this in today because I think it's one thing where we're like, thank God someone's paying attention to the lunacy here. So the House Judiciary Committee has sent a letter to Attorney General Nick Brown saying it is going to take a closer look at our state's sanctuary policies. And one of the people who has helped to spearhead this is one of Washington State's newest members of Congress, Congressman Michael Baumgartner, who represents the 5th Congressional District over on the east side of the state. So they've sent a letter to Nick Brown basically saying, WTF, dude. Like, what are you really doing here? Right? That's what it said, right? That's what I would put in all my letters.
Right.
WTF, dude. It says in part, as a result of Washington's sanctuary laws, there appears to be little or no interaction between Washington law enforcement entities and federal immigration authorities. Although you claim to serve the people of Washington, your office appears to put the needs of criminal illegal aliens before Washingtonians. The committee is concerned about Washington's role in undermining public safety in contravention of federal immigration law, as am I concerned. We ask that you provide the following information. All documents and communications relating and referring to investigations into local law enforcement entities in Washington for their cooperation with federal immigration officials for the period of January 1st, 2023 to present. And there is some cause for this, of course, because there's a sheriff in Washington state who came out and said, hey, I'm standing ready to help ICE deport illegal aliens who are engaged in criminal activities out of our community. It helps with our mission of public safety. And what did Nick Brown do? He sued the guy. So it's like, you can't, if you're a sheriff and you dare to make public safety better, we're going to sue you because illegal aliens come first. So the House Judiciary. Oh, if you didn't watch the Sunday show, Nicole fumbled the word judiciary and I made fun of her.
I did better that time.
Wow, karma is rough. Judiciary. I did the same thing you did.
Judiciary.
Karma's not fun.
I know.
So the House Judiciary is now paying attention to this, which is good. And I hope they drag him in front of Congress. I hope they drag him in front of the committee, along with Bob Ferguson, former Governor Jay Inslee, the mayor of Seattle, all the people who are putting the needs of illegal aliens ahead of the safety of American citizens. All right, I was going to talk about the Cory Booker thing. I guess I can just briefly. I'm so over it.
I
what
agree.
Is the point?
Me too.
I'm seeing so Cory Booker had like a 24-hour speech, right? And the only thing impressive about it is you can stand for 24 hours and talk.
And not pee.
Good for you, man. Like, that's cool. But I'm reading all these lines or all these headlines. One of them was like the Associated Press. Has Cory Booker's marathon remarks reinvigorated the Trump resistance?
Nope.
No, dude. Like, what? To me, the whole thing seems incredibly narcissistic.
Yep.
And self-congratulatory. Look at us and all these Democrats. You're so brave and oh my. But what does it do? What does it do? Well, now, I'm sure people who don't like Trump already liked it. But it doesn't do anything. It's literally an exercise in narcissism. I would feel the same way if a Republican did it and acted like, oh, we are invigorating the resistance. No, you just talked for a really long time and your legs probably hurt, but good for you. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do it, but it doesn't do anything meaningful whatsoever.
I actually think it's a little bit of the cry wolf thing, right? Because I think they're doing this so early. I mean, he's 3 months in. Give it some time because, I mean, we're sick of it. It's all these Teslas being attacked. It's like Musk complaints, Trump complaints, everything complaints, stand up in Congress. Like none of it's doing anything. And you're only 100 days in. And now I feel like people have shut it off because there wasn't a lot of attention for him. I mean, there were some headlines here and there, but nobody was paying attention to him.
Well, I mean,
and I didn't hear any good things that he said. Anything taken from it that was highlighted really. And I just think it was a waste.
And maybe that's our bias, but you just talking about how Trump bad for 25 hours is just exhausting.
Yeah.
And nobody
cares.
Unless you're like specifically, hey, we're stopping this vote from this and all, it just was absolutely
self-serving. Now you can say, I did it.
So self-serving. And then they congratulated him. You've just reached the record.
Right.
And they're all, oh
so
my
somebody
God.
that was,
I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Strom's, right? So for civil rights, he was standing up for civil rights or whatever. And now you've trumped the civil rights. No, it was a waste. And I think it was totally self-serving and ridiculous.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. Okay. Let me see.
Good on them.
Sure.
I think people just ignore it now. I think people are over it.
I don't know. I saw all these people in this AP article on Facebook being like, he's a hero. And I'm like, is he?
But that's the media. I don't think real people are paying attention anymore. I mean, there's the ones that are already riled up, scratching Teslas, but the ones that are just living their lives, I think they're just looking at it all and saying that's silly.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Heaven forbid we cut waste. And
crazy. It's so scary.
Make better use of your money.
All right, let's get to our daily subscriber show poll before we get to comments. So obviously there's a fight still in Olympia over taxation. It looks like the wealth tax is off the table because Bob Ferguson won't sign it, but there's worse tax that are still on the table. So I asked you on Patreon, Locals, and X, exclusive for subscribers, of the taxes still on the table, which is the most concerning to you? Property tax, B&O tax, or expanding Seattle's payroll tax statewide? Nicole, which is most concerning to you?
Gosh, they all have their own things, but property tax I think will hurt a lot of people. I think the rest of it's going to hurt businesses and take it out of state, which will hurt everybody. But I think that property tax will have the most detrimental immediate impact.
Yeah, I agree on that. And 90% of people who took this on Patreon agree on that. Park paying an increasing property tax will eventually drive us out of the state on a fixed disability income. We can barely afford to hang on right now. We bought in 1996. So 1 year left on the mortgage may buy us a little time after the payoff next year with the rising cost of everything, though. I do know we're on borrowed time. And think about that. Like, you buy your home in 96, and my husband bought our home just 15 years ago, but he still bought it for an unheard of price for today's terms. It was like $300,000. And it would probably sell for over $1 million now, which is insane. But people are relying on that for like a nest egg, right? So you buy at a good time, you invest, 1996, you're going to pay your home off next year. But the property taxes, you'll probably pay more in property taxes than you did for your very first mortgage payments when you bought it. So you've planned for this, like I paid off my home, but what good does it do you on a fixed income? It's really wild. And I hate to say it, but that seems like the one they're going to hold on to the tightest.
I think so, but it is. For me, I bought at a really good time in 2020 and my value has skyrocketed, but my taxes have doubled, I think, since just or my assessed value, like the taxes have doubled. So anyway, it's crazy and scary because people go in with you go in with a budget. You think like, okay, I got to leave some room for whatever, but that's out of control.
Yeah.
They're getting greedy.
And I want to share these stories because again, you guys don't have the business lobbyists down pushing back for you. Hydro Dogs on Local says, I'm coming up on retirement in the next 2 years. I don't want to be taxed out of my home. If the state taxes is allowed to go up 3% per year, the local tax authority will want to do the same. And these are for the local tax authorities to allow it, but it's going to be more than 3% a year. It's going to be more than 3% a year. There's no limit, right? Said this will also hurt local fire and school levies and others. People only have so much money to spend. And if this is a good point I haven't heard brought up. And if they have no choice to on local taxes, they'll cut back on elective taxes. So you might feel so overtaxed that you're going to say no to other things that you might have otherwise said yes to on the ballot. That's a very good point that I hadn't really thought of is at some point tax fatigue has to kick in for Democratic voters. In Seattle, for instance, you have a lot of renters, and in their mind, they don't tie it to their rents going up. They don't realize like, oh yeah, property, I don't own property. I hate to say I'm not saying they're dumb, but I just don't think they're making that tie that if I go against homeowners or against landlords, I'm actually going against myself and my own interests.
And I think that there are some people, Dave Summers, who testified for it, he pointed out some numbers and he's like, oh, it's going to be $12. No big deal. No big deal. And I think there are some politicians that are going in saying, I don't want to go crazy here. I just need a little space. I need a little help. I need it. I think there are some people that think there's just I just need a little bit, but there's a lot that will take advantage. As we know, there's a lot of people that will take advantage of that given the position. So.
And they can't be trusted. And as we said on the show yesterday, it's an extreme example, but State Representative Travis Couture introduces an amendment to give people a short little sales tax holiday on school supplies. And he said, we can pay for it if we get rid of unnecessary spending like laser hair removal for transgender prison inmates. And Democrats shamed him as like horrible and racist.
Right.
Literally. And it's like, okay, so you guys want to continue in a budget crisis to spend money on laser hair removal for transgender inmates. I get it. That's a couple $100,000 a year, but it doesn't matter. It's the principle of it. And the fact that you're willing to take money from hardworking people who are struggling to pay so that a dude in prison can feel more feminine and fit in better in the women's prison that you also allow him to be in. Lost your damn minds. Lost your damn minds. No rationale for it. I want to read this one because it's on the business side of things. Mother of Pearl. As a small business owner, all these taxes are already shockingly high. We will have to pass these costs on to the consumer, not out of greed, but survival. We donate to local youth activities, clubs, and sponsor kids' travel leagues. We donate one work project a year to someone in need in the community. Leave us our hard-earned money, and we will continue to help our community. That is a really good point, too. For businesses that are, and have been very involved in the community and in nonprofits and donating money and services, you continue to take money out of their bottom line, that's where that money is going to be pulled back from. They won't be able to do as much good in the community. They won't be able to donate to nonprofits because they've got to shovel their money into the greedy pockets of the government. I sound more like my dad every day. Oh my God. I bet he's up in heaven or wherever he ended up being like, I gotcha. All right. We'll get to comments in our closing sanity check. First, I have had tremendous success. I mean, look at me, guys. Don't I look good? Look, I have a little suit on today. I never wear a suit. Thanks, guys. Yes, Brandi, you look beautiful. Thanks, Nicole.
Beautiful.
Thank you. The Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program gets a lot of credit for that. I lost 40 pounds on the program, lost almost all the weight I put on during COVID-19, and I've been able to keep it off for 2 years now. And the thing about it is it just fits into your life because there's no drugs or injections, no prepackaged meals. So it's really just real food. You shop for yourself. You can even find stuff to eat at restaurants or whatever it is, but it's teaching you the right foods in the right combinations and the right portions to be able to jumpstart your metabolism and keep you kind of in this zone where you can have long-term success. So I found the program to be really easy to follow. And I don't think it's right for everyone, but I think a good starting point is just to make that call to Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team and talk through the program and see if it's something that you want to invest in. For me, I mean, going on 2.5 years, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. EastsideWeightLossClinic.com, EastsideWeightLossClinic.com. Check.com. Okay, some comments here. Larry Miller, the Democrats will propose a whole bunch of ludicrous tax increases, knowing they will cause an uproar. Now they will either back off and get some of them, or they will let Ferguson just veto some of them so he looks like the good guy. Either way, they're going to increase our taxes. Yeah, and that's kind of along the lines of what I think is going on here. It's like, let's throw everything at them, and then we look better if we take a few of them back, and they're not as mad, but we're going to be as mad, okay?
Yeah, I don't think they're doing anything for Ferguson, but
until you cut the money
for them,
for laser hair removal for transgender inmates, I support no new taxes at all at any level ever. Kathy Carr, what I really don't understand is how all the Democrats who voted or wrote these bills on increasing the property tax. What I really don't understand is how all the Democrats who voted or wrote these bills on increasing the property tax don't seem to care that it's going to affect them just as much as it will us. I don't know either.
They'd rather spend it.
I have no idea.
Yes.
Some of them maybe just have a lot of money. Who knows, really? Merwin Wren, property taxes in Washington are an unrealized gain tax. If it were not, my taxes would be based on what I paid for my house, not an assessed value. That's a good point. Yeah, because, you're paying on something that you actually didn't come out of pocket for, which sucks if you bought your house a long time ago and now it's worth these astronomical prices. You'll benefit from that at some point, but you haven't realized that gain just yet. Robert Parker, $5 super chat. Thank you for the creepy Crowell story. Excellent coverage. Robert is actually featured in the story. He's the guy who serves Crowell the paperwork for a lawsuit and ends up, putting the pieces of this whole wild tale together. You really do have to read it.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. Barron, purely good cop, bad cop is why Dems threw out 20 different taxes so they can look good. Alaska, Amazon, Microsoft are against the payroll tax and wealth tax.
Again, too little, too late.
Somebody really has this as a screen name. I'm going to read it because it's funny. You get it, right?
Oh, yeah. It took me a second, though.
This is a total Bart Simpson thing. Ligma Wick. Thanks. Welcome to the People's Republic of Washington. Nothing throws me off. I see it. Let's see. Krista, maybe he should call the hate hotline while he's at it. This is clearly hate for his beliefs. Jonathan Choe. I loved when Jonathan said, do you guys have any reporters of color in there?
Right.
It seems kind of racist. You're not letting the Asian guy in. I love that because he's just turning it around on them. Let me see here. Jennifer Glass, they're so used to getting a free pass. They are so corrupt. Greg Anderson, can Let's Go Washington help get recalls launched against Reichdahl and Brown? I'm not sure if that's something they're interested in. Bill Biz, the innocuous sounding Planned Parenthood is about anti-child, anti-planning, anti-family as it gets. Nothing more than an abortion clinic adept at fundraising and propagandizing. I agree.
I know. And then apparently they're giving that funding out to kids.
Yeah.
For
here's
coming to their sex
$400. Teach other kids that STDs aren't that bad and to get sterilized.
Teen council.
Oh my
Can you please just call them the teen sexperts so that parents know what their kids are getting into? Because this is ridiculous.
It is. So Wake Up Wah, $10 super chat. These teen councils are funded by taxpayers as the legislature gave Planned Parenthood $50 million in the last budget. Good point. Matthew Cook, holy smokes, a $50 super chat with a quote from George Orwell. In 1984, the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command, and if all others accepted the lie, if all records told the same tale, then the lie passed into history and became truth. Amen. Let's see here. Sergeant Pickles, 1,000% chance that once they force people to sell their homes, they will claim that housing availability improved. Yeah. Oh, housing availability went up. Everybody freaking left. Everybody left. Gray Matter says, make this a standalone segment, Brandi and Nicole. This needs to go national. I don't know what that's in reference to because every segment on our show is so damn good.
Right.
One more here, Merwin. Property tax in Washington. Oh, we already read that.
Yep.
Sorry. It was in there twice, Nicole.
I don't know how it got in there twice, but sorry about that.
Mystery. But Nicole thinks our studio's haunted, so maybe it was the ghost.
Everything
Ghost of our
I screw up, I say, that must be the ghost.
Yeah, like literally Nicole will leave all the lights on multiple days in a row and she'll be like, we have a ghost. Or she thinks a homeless person is living upstairs.
Yeah, I'm not going up there. Daryl volunteered.
Oh, it's a good time. I don't want to leave you guys today. I'm having a ton of fun. We were maybe going to have a show today because we're waiting on something to manifest for a story we're working on. I don't know when that's going to happen. Maybe after the show, but we're like, hey, just go forward to the show anyway. There's so much good stuff. And if we have to stop mid-show, people will understand. So
120, how did that flew by?
flew by because we're having literally a freaking blast. Literally, are we not?
And we couldn't do it without you. Please keep sending us all these great
Yeah,
tips,
you guys send us great stuff. We just adore you. All right, let's end with another great thing by Nicole in our closing sanity check. All right, we've got a good clip from Bill Maher, who apparently now, BFFs with the president? I read that Bill Maher went to the White House and he printed off a list of all the bad things Donald Trump has ever said about him, and Donald Trump signed it, which I think is very funny.
There's some interview coming out soon.
Yeah, I love that. But now Bill Maher says that he agrees PBS and NPR must be defunded.
My namesake, Catherine Maher, was head of NPR, and, she said, we're completely unbiased. Give me a break, lady. I mean, they're crazy far left. So, I think we're past the age, really, where the government, first of all, why do we need to subsidize? Why can't we have outlets like this? And we're so polarized. These outlets became popular at a time when Republicans and Democrats didn't hate each other and weren't at each other's throats and didn't think each other was an existential threat. In that world, you can't have places like this, I think, anymore. They have to be private.
I agree 100%. And as I talked about, the more press, the better. The more press access, the better. All of that still holds true, but there really should be the very, very base level involvement from the government in that. I've only given two exceptions, entities like TVW that stream live meetings, the same with C-SPAN. Those are the only entities I support having any sort of taxpayer funds, and it's just the direction that we need to go. If what you're doing is good, people will pay for it and support it, as we have learned with Undivided. That was kind of like a little commercial. If you have not signed up to support our show already, please do so. It's just $5 a month, people, for all this gloriousness that you're getting every day. You can sign up, undividedpod.com, hit the little box that says support the show, and if you are a first responder, a member of the military, or a veteran, you can get 30% off your first year of Undivided by using the promo code USA. How great is that? All right, so we will see you back here tomorrow for our final live show of the week. We still have a lot to do this week, a lot going on. I feel like I have some sort of housekeeping to share with you, but maybe not. Okay, ta-ta for now.